Samira, an ambitious young woman, has just graduated from university in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Before leaving for an isolated village to begin her career as a teacher, she says a heartfelt goodbye to her family. But when she arrives, she finds the local children cold, distant, and deeply disappointed by their previous teachers. However, as time passes, she realizes the real problem isn't the children at all, but rather the fact that a neighboring village is under constant military attack. Terrified, Samira tries to contact her family to ensure their safety, but she gets no response. Desperate for answers, she resorts to sending them letters. Over the next few days, she notices an unsettling shift. Some of the villagers have started actively avoiding her. Then, the very next morning, Samira is suddenly jolted awake by blood-curdling screams. Peering through her window, she is horrified to see armed soldiers taking complete control of the area. Samira frantically tries to pack her most valuable belongings, but before she can, an armed soldier bursts into her home. Attempting to defuse the situation, she politely offers him a drink, but he shows absolutely no interest. Instead, he harshly orders her to gather her things and join the rest of the villagers outside. Samira is herded into a local church with the rest of the population. Soon, the enemy commander arrives and coldly orders all the men to step outside. Despite a mother's desperate, agonizing attempts to hold onto her sons, the boys are forced to obey the captain's orders. To everyone's absolute horror, the men are lined up in the street and executed without mercy. Afterward, Samira and the remaining women are forced onto buses, driven away to an unknown fate. During the grueling journey, Samira watches out the window as the soldiers torch the village houses, clearly attempting to erase any trace of the atrocities they just committed. When they finally arrive at a vast, desolate clearing, the women are forced to sleep directly on the cold ground, left alone to process the horrors they've witnessed. The next morning, the soldiers wake up and casually go about their daily routines, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Everyone is forced into absolute obedience. The soldiers are completely unstable, ready to kill anyone who shows even a hint of resistance. Despite the severe lack of food, Samira's generous heart drives her to share her small rations with the starving children. When she notices one of the women is unconscious and in critical condition, she desperately begs the crowd for anyone with medical knowledge to step forward. However, a nurse grimly advises her that it's better to just ignore the horrors around her if she wants to survive. As weeks pass, the women try to adapt to the brutal conditions of the camp, with nothing to do but care for the children. One night, more trucks loaded with soldiers arrive, and they immediately begin aggressively searching the prisoners. The next day, Samira notices a terrifying new pattern. The soldiers are handpicking certain young girls and dragging them to a nearby house. Alarmed by what she is seeing, she does everything she can to avoid the soldiers, staying as close to the nurse as possible. But 2 days later, a soldier enters the camp and calls out Samira's name. Though she pretends not to hear him, she ultimately has no choice but to follow him to the house. Inside, she is confronted by 3 men, who coldly order her to strip. When she hesitates, one of them violently tears her clothes off and begins to assault her. In the midst of this living nightmare, Samira tries to mentally escape, fixating on a tiny bug crawling along the wall. But the soldiers don't stop. They continue their abuse until she feels completely disassociated, as if her soul has left her body, looking down and watching her own suffering. Later, she wakes up in a different room, surrounded by women and girls who have shared the exact same tragic fate. The older women are forced to do domestic chores, while the younger girls are treated as the absolute property of the soldiers, who use them at will. Samira notices a young girl among the captives and does her best to comfort and protect her. Suddenly, a soldier appears and drags Samira away again. But this time, she is brought to a very young soldier, who looks completely lost and unsure of what to do. Fearing the worst once more, she is shocked when the young soldier turns out to be gentle. He simply holds her tightly and stays by her side, falling asleep without hurting her. The next day, however, reality strikes again. Another soldier arrives and drags away one of the girls, claiming she is the sister of an old friend. It's a cruel lie. When the girl is finally thrown back into the room the following day, she is covered in severe wounds. Samira and the nurse try their best to care for her, but the girl's health deteriorates day by day. One morning, they wake up to find she has passed away. The soldiers casually carry her body out and bury it as if it means nothing. This plunges Samira into total despair, convincing her that none of them will make it out of this camp alive. Driven by a need to regain some sense of identity, she decides that if these are indeed her final days, she will at least spend them looking and feeling human. Despite her deep depression, she begins trying to present herself neatly again. The other prisoners warn her that this will only attract the soldiers' attention, but Samira no longer cares. Soon after, she is brought directly to the captain's office. He seems deeply drawn to her and wants to get to know her better. Surprisingly, he treats her with kindness, realizing she ended up here by mistake and doesn't belong to the local village. When Samira notices a photograph on his desk, she tries asking about his family, but he remains completely silent. Sensing a strange dynamic, she decides to play along, even dressing up in a red gown, as if she were going on a date with an admirer, desperate to understand the young captain. While the other women fear this relationship will end in tragedy, Samira is brought to his private quarters. He offers her food and drink, treating her with genuine respect. Still, she remains highly cautious, terrified of a sudden shift in his mood. At one point, she locks herself in the bathroom just to catch her breath and steady her racing heart. Eventually, she steps back out, and they share a quiet moment together. But whenever she asks about her situation, he refuses to give anything away. After spending the night with him, Samira returns to her cell. The seed of escape begins to grow in her mind, especially after she notices an unguarded perimeter. However, she quickly abandons the plan when she spots a patrol lurking nearby. The next day, she meets the captain again. He shows even more empathy, allowing her to use his private bathroom to relax. When she comes out, he finally opens up, talking to her about his son. Taking advantage of the softened, romantic atmosphere, Samira discreetly steals painkillers from his medical stash to smuggle back to the other suffering prisoners. As time goes on, it becomes completely obvious that the commander has fallen deeply in love with her. Yet, the underlying hatred in the camp remains. The women secretly agree that if any of them ever get the opportunity, they will kill any soldier they can get their hands on. The next morning, Samira wakes up to the sound of distant gunfire. Later that night, during her visit to the captain, she passes the bodies of several dead soldiers, the very men who had assaulted her. While she is in his room, the captain suddenly receives an urgent radio mission and rushes out, trusting her enough to leave her entirely alone. Samira immediately searches for a phone to contact her family, but once again she has no luck. Suddenly, a sharp gunshot echoes from outside. Looking through the window, she is horrified to see the captain himself shooting one of the female prisoners. When he returns to the room, the romantic illusion is completely shattered. He coldly reminds her that she is still a prisoner, even if he doesn't personally abuse her. As weeks pass, the number of prisoners steadily dwindles and random executions become a daily reality. One day, an elderly woman begs Samira to help another prisoner, who tried to end her own life after losing her daughter. The next day, the entire camp is thrown into confusion as soldiers begin forcing the women onto buses to move them out. Samira expects the absolute worst, but she is stunned when the captain orders her to step aside, telling her he has something important to say. To her absolute shock, he announces that the war is officially over, and she is free to go. He says his goodbyes, hands over her belongings, and even gives her some money. During the long bus ride home, Samira stares out the window in deep sorrow at the completely devastated landscape of her country. Eventually, the bus stops, and the women are forced to cross a river on foot. They march together through the wilderness until they finally cross the border and return to their home city. Only then, stepping onto safe soil, do they truly feel free. Shortly after her return, Samira visits a doctor and receives life-changing news. She is pregnant. There is no doubt that the child belongs to the captain. Devastated, she decides to terminate the pregnancy, but the doctor warns her that doing so under her current physical trauma could be fatal. Ultimately, Samira goes back home to her parents. They are overjoyed that she survived, but utterly heartbroken to learn she is carrying the child of an enemy soldier. When the time comes, Samira gives birth to a baby boy and initially decides to leave him at an orphanage, unable to face what he represents. However, after looking at an old childhood photo of herself with her own family, her heart softens. She changes her mind and decides to raise the boy herself, knowing that while his face will forever remind her of the darkest days of her life, he is also a symbol of her survival. If you enjoyed this movie recap, please leave a like, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Thanks for watching.